Good. Go.
Hello and welcome everybody to Heathen Talk. I am one of your regular hosts, Thorin. I have kicked the other two regular hosts off the show for the night. Why, you might ask? Not for the usual reasons. We're not doing a military coup episode tonight. We're going to be doing one of those hopefully next month, in which case I will be your only regular host that night too. But tonight we have a very special episode. Joining me are going to be a couple of members from a tribe that's really close to me in the, they're south of the Seattle area, closer to Tacoma, Olympia. That'd be Hawkshearth. And this is their chieftain, Alf Herigstad, and Will McDonald.
Hello, and thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
All right. So the reason that I've kicked the other two hosts off the show tonight is because I have a special announcement. And that special announcement deserves a special show. And that special show should definitely happen right before Women's Night so that they have a chance to tell us all the reasons the three of us are wrong tonight. And my special announcement is that soon there will be another sarcastic person like me joining us in this world. I'm having a child. Or rather, my wife's having a child, and I'm just sitting back watching her suffer and trying to help. But I am finally reproducing, so I have invited Alf on, the chieftain of Hawkshearth, who has raised heathens and been a heathen for how long now, Alf?
A little over 10 years, maybe 12.
And then next to him, Will McDonald, who was raised heathen.
Yeah, I've been a heathen since about 9-ish was when I first started being raised around that stuff. And it was here in Alf's kindred, so it's a pretty unique situation.
All right, so I figured to me... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, hopefully it's not going to be as unique as the years go on. My hope is that more and more people will be raised heathen.
Well, that's the idea, and if I'm about to spawn a child, I would like to get some pointers, honestly, because I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm certainly not qualified. But before we get into all that, we have our normal stuff that we have to do at the beginning of our episode, and you guys know how much I love doing that, but I am the only one to do it tonight, so I will. First of all, I'd like to point out that tonight's episode is sponsored by the Arlington Viking Fest. We've been talking about them for a couple of weeks. If you're up in the Western Cascadian area, that's going to be like the place to be on the weekend of October 1st and 2nd. Heathen Talk will have a booth there. I will be there, as will Josh. And also our producer, Matt, is running the blacksmithing demo. And I'm going to go harass him over that and make him let me swing hammers at his anvil for a little while at some point. So coming out and visit us, there's always really awesome stuff going on there. Everything from just, your regular Viking-themed stuff to some really seriously kick-ass, not joking around reenactors, but people who seriously put in their homework and can tell you just about every minutia of history from the age they're depicting. It's going to be a good time had by all. So we hope to see you all there. Also, if you like Heathen Talk, let us know. You can find all of our various social medias collected together at our website, heathentalk.com. And for those of you that are too lazy to go to heathentalk.com, because you're like me, often enough, we have a Facebook, we have a Twitter, we have an Instagram, and I can remember some of how to get to those. But because I can't, I know I can go back to heathentalk.com, and they're all listed there for you to get to. And there's even ones I didn't mention, I'm sure. So yeah, if you like us, go there and let us know. If you hate us, go there and let us know. Either way, it's good information. If you have any show ideas for us, you can go to our Facebook and let us know there. You can go to all the things on heathen.com. We also have a new subreddit. It's reddit/r/heathen talk. And pitch us your ideas, because we're always looking for what you guys want to hear about. And it makes it a lot easier when we don't have to sit around figuring out what to tell you. Okay. I think that... let me give you a little bit more about Arlington Viking Fest, because I'm totally scattered and forgot to tell you exactly where it is. Obviously, you can Google it and look it up. Yeah, I went to the wrong thing. That's in Arlington. Bear with me, guys. You know that this is not my normal thing I do with the podcast. Another thing we have coming up in November is the Midwest Winter Moot, November 2nd through 4th at Osage Hills State Park in Oklahoma. Winter Moot is an annual heathen retreat hosted by Bifrost Way Kindred at the beautiful Osage Hills State Park located in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. I'm sure somebody from the Midwest is going to be angry at me for how I said that. This year. To provide this gathering is another opportunity to offer the gift of hospitality and regional community and provide a forum to share and learn about our heathen folkway. Our host Lauren will be presenting a workshop there on loosening. So if you're in that area, absolutely go and see her. So I think that's all we have for the usual thing. I think we popped up the info on both that and the Arlington Viking Fest on heathentalk.com. So there is yet another reason for us to direct your traffic in that direction. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pretend that I got everything done that I was supposed to do, as is guaranteed in my contract with Heathen Talk, and move on. And if not, this is my show tonight. So, one more tradition we have, and this is my favorite one, the one I never forget, and the one that I'm always happy to partake in, is we toast somebody who's doing something good in heathenry. There are plenty of people out there like that. You guys are sending us examples. We want to hear more so we can decide who to toast. But tonight, we've got a very special one. As I told you earlier, our guests are Alf Herigstad and Will McDonald. Well, we're going to go ahead and toast Will's dad, Dan McDonald. He's also a member of their kindred, Hawkshearth, and he's an all-around good guy. Honestly, he's always been there and helpful when I've been around him. He will sit and have great conversations with you. He knows what he's talking about, but at the same time is also willing to listen to what you have to say to see if maybe there's something he missed. Honestly, he's the type of heathen I like to be around. And we need more like him. And he raised Will. And I got to say, nobody can be all bad if they raised Will. So you guys have a little bit more to say about him than I do, I imagine.
Well, Dan McDonald is my best friend, and him and I have been through so much together. We were part of another kindred together, and it blew up, and it was horrible. But that's one of the things we went through together, and going through things together really allow you to get to know somebody. And I can tell you, Dan McDonald, the reason he's my best friend is because he's probably the most solid man I know. He's true to his beliefs and his convictions, and if he fucks up, if he's wrong, he'll tell you. And he's just, if I need help, if I need anything, Dan's always there. He is the epitome, in my mind, of what a heathen man is. And I'm really happy we're toasting him tonight. He can't be here because he found love, and he's in Colorado pursuing that interest. And that's so awesome. I'm so happy for him. But I'm going to let his progeny speak now.
So they say that everyone's just a product of their own environment. And I think that's definitely true. So if you think that I'm cool, it's just because I was raised by my father. He is a gleaming example of what a heathen man is and should be. And I'm really happy to be toasting him tonight. He's done a lot of great things in the heathen world and the world in general. And I know he will continue to do excellent things in the world. He is such a positive influence in my life and in the lives of all the other people that know him. So I don't know what else to say.
So, the only other thing to say is
Hail Dan.
Skull!
Hail Dan.
Hail Dan. Hail Dan.
All right. So the other half of this tradition is we like to tell the audience what we're drinking. And since I'm the only one who has the show tonight, I will start out. I'm drinking Celine Saison from Victory. This is, I don't know, those of you that are beer geeks out there and actually like and drink Saisons, you'll look at that color and be a little bit confused because you cannot see through this. And it is very, very dark and black and also very, very delicious. Chocolate, a little bit of wood smoke, clove flavor. It's a little dry. It's just a really great Saison. So I highly recommend people to go out there and get that. Victory hits a home run again. So, Alf.
Awesome. Well, Will and I are drinking mead that I make. I'm at the risk of sounding braggadocious. I make good mead, and this particular one is a recipe that I stumbled on a little while ago. I grow my own hops, so this mead is hopped, and I use champagne yeast. It's about 19%, and a little twist of cinnamon that gets you on the back end. But the hops in the mead, I think, bring out the floral qualities of the honey, and which is interesting because it's kind of dry, but yet it's very, very flavorful. And I use a lot of honey when I make mead, 19 pounds per 5 or 6 gallons. So I'll see what Will has to say about it.
It kicks ass. Yeah, the hopped mead idea is excellent. I think it's really the way of the future when it comes to mead. No, it's good stuff.
It's the way of the past.
Yeah.
I'll say, yeah, no, he makes great mead. Those of you that were able to make it out to Cascading Moot probably had a little bit of his mead. He brought more than plenty and shared it around, and it was delicious, and everybody drank it. So, yeah, that's definitely a worthy offering. But, all right, so we've got all of those usual preliminaries out of the way that I usually just tune out for as a host. So, yeah, I'm having a kid, guys.
Hey, man, first, I want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
It's probably one of the most awesome things that can happen to a man.
Truly.
Is to have children. So congratulations from both of us.
Yeah, I really want to second that, Thorin. I'm just so happy for you. So I look forward to see how things turn out. No pressure.
Thanks, guys. It's definitely something that, in an abstract way, I've been looking forward to for a long time, and it's interesting that as the days go by, it's getting a lot less abstract.
Yeah, but, when you start feeling them kick and stuff, you're like, wow, there's something in there. It becomes real. And
yeah, we're not quite there yet. You know, I've seen the heartbeat on the ultrasound, and that was a bit of a surreal moment. But we're still, I think we're looking at a late April due date. So I still got a little bit of time to get used to it and adjust to what's coming.
You'll do fine.
But, I hope I will. But, that's part of the reason that I've got you guys on tonight is because nobody does fine without, a village helping to raise a kid. And I got to go to, at least one guy who knows how it's done and somebody else who at least has been the product of a damn good father. So he's seen how it's done from the other side.
Well, I wonder if there's ever been a man who found out he was going to have children who thought, hey, no sweat. I'm going to ace this. Nobody thinks that. I mean, everybody is full of trepidation and, you dad that you can. Everybody does. But sadly, the majority of fathers probably don't turn out to be the best dad that they can. But there are ways to mitigate that. And I think personally, from a heathen perspective, we've got the best chance of mitigating that. You want to say no?
Yeah, I think that there is inherently a good culture within Heathenry for this sort of thing, because I would say, at least from my outside experience, that half of what there is in raising kids is just from showing them what they should be doing. Lead by example, as it were. And when you have a culture like ours that we are, is the common refrain. It always reminds me that, for lack of a better term, I've got an audience, and now my audience is about to be in my house.
Well, that's something that I say a lot on my own podcast, and that is, as a man, somebody is always watching you. Somebody, no matter where you go in your life, somebody's watching you. It might be a child, the guy in line at Starbucks, or when no one else is around, you are watching you. And in that moment, when you're being watched by somebody, you are the example of manhood in the world at that moment. And when you have children, that's all the time, man. I mean, that is the biggest deal. I have 3 children. I have 9 grandchildren now. Holy number. And I don't know if there'll be any more, but I had the luxury of being raised by the best man that I've ever known, my dad. And he didn't spend a lot of time trying to tell me stuff. He just lived an exemplary life, and that is what it's all about.
Yeah, if I may, I think that our tradition offers a wonderful opportunity for good role models. I mean, like you said, the motto, if you will, of "we are our deeds" is the best way to raise children, because we aspire to be the adult figures that we see in our community. And when we recognize that individuals being better people for the benefit of the tribe benefits our children, that makes every generation be raised a little better than the one before it, ideally. And if we continue that pattern, I am very hopeful for the future of heathenry, especially from parents. And once again, congratulations, Thorin, because you have a wonderful opportunity ahead.
So there's a lot to be said about, just the general aspect of how does one be a good father. And I think we're going to be going over a lot of that in different aspects tonight. I do want to try to, as often as we can, bring this back to a heathen perspective. And one of the things that I want to start with is, we talk about raising kids heathen, but what exactly does that mean? Are you talking about, because, there's a lot of kids out there that are, raised Christian, for example, and that can mean a lot of things. That can mean, just raised in the Christian overculture, or dragged to church 2 or 3 nights a week and forced to do all the things. So, if from your perspective, I'll start with you, Alf, especially from your perspective, what does it mean to raise a kid as a heathen?
Well, we have a lot of young kids in our kindred. We have kids from, infants up to teenagers. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, we had the privilege of having a rite of transformation, which is like a rite of passage ritual for one of our children that was 15, a female. And so that's our age. And after that, they're regarded as an adult in the kindred with adult benefits and responsibilities. But the younger kids, I mean, what does it mean to raise a kid as a heathen? Well, again, we're back to the example. I don't have young kids in my house right now, but if I did, they'd every day see the things I do, see how I honor the spirits of the land, how I honor my ancestors, how I honor the gods, how I approach life from a I am my deeds perspective. And that example cannot be overstated. And at our events, we have a woman, Blair, who takes the children aside while we're in the main ritual part, and she has kind of, I guess you could call it like Sunday school, but it's some training for kids that is relevant to what we're doing for the day. But more importantly, they're there. They're there for the whole day. They're watching us. They're watching their parents. They're watching us interact. So really, living as a heathen is the best way to raise a child as a heathen, because they're going to see you. I mean, it's a way of life. It's not something we do once every now and then. It's something we do every day, all day. And your child, just by virtue of being in your home, will be raised as a heathen.
So, Will, what about you? I mean, obviously you haven't raised any heathens that I know of.
Not that I know of either.
Let's hope that you do know of them if it happens, or when it happens, I suppose, because I'm sure it will. But what's your take on that?
I think that this is something that happens to every parent, heathen or not, where their children become a product of the environment that the parent provides them. So, as heathens, we need to recognize that and take on the responsibility, the obligation that is parenthood, to provide the best example, the best environment for our kids, to help them become responsible, self-sufficient adults who are part of a strong community. And that's really the obligation of parenthood. And I think it extends beyond heathenry, but we need to realize as heathens that, once again, we are our deeds. And as parents, every deed matters because it's being watched by your child. And I've been lucky enough to be raised in a great community, an excellent kindred, and that has shaped me into the person I am today. And if everyone takes on that responsibility of passing on the best legacy to the next generation, things will improve generation by generation. And that's something that heathenry could really use.
Absolutely. So, this is, go ahead, Al, because this is one of those subjects where, like I said, you guys are the experts at this point.
Something I didn't... A heathen having a child, something you have to be prepared for, is conveying the fact to your child that we live in a country with a Christian overculture. And that's going to come up, a lot. I remember when I was a kid, it was my birthday, and I invited a bunch of kids from school, and this one gal couldn't come because she was Jehovah's Witness. I didn't understand, but I mean, it's a big deal for kids. So how you convey that to them and how they convey it to their peers is going to be a critical thing that it will make their journey a lot easier. So it's something to start thinking about right now.
Well, it's interesting you brought that up because, I mean, my wife and I have talked about that. My wife is not a heathen necessarily. She has her own spiritual views. And but we both talked about the fact that we're living in a Christian society. We're living in a Christian overculture, and we're definitely, not raising or planning on raising our kid in a Christian home. And there are some really mundane issues that we've thought about with this. These kids are going to be, when they hit 4, 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, they're going to be in school and they're going to be surrounded by their friends who are talking about, oh, it's Easter, or hey, it's Christmas time, or any other various holidays that at this point have gotten to barely even religious in a lot of ways. They've almost become secular cultural events, but they don't necessarily have any place in our culture. So how do you suggest dealing with that kind of subject? Because, I mean, that's a peer pressure issue at that point. That's a little bit rough.
I think it depends a lot on the personality of your child. Because I know some kids who I would tell, look, that's your opportunity to boast about what you do at this time of year and to help educate these other kids. And it'll be fun. And the other kids will find it interesting because they will. Because it is. And so that's one avenue. I mean, it depends a lot on the personality of your child. But I mean, you have any thoughts on that, Will?
Well, if that were to happen, and your child says, well, we heathens at such and such time of year do this, that's something that's maybe not necessarily beneficial for your child, but it's really beneficial for heathenry because it normalizes our religion. We kind of have a problem in our culture of being seen as a fringe religious movement, and I think part of the problem of that lies in the fact that most heathens are adults who found heathenry in their adult lives. And the more we can raise children in a heathen culture, the more it will be accepted and normalized in the view of the overculture. So I think raising children as heathens is a really important thing because it's supposed to be a generational tradition. And right now that's not the case because we don't have a lot of non-adults practicing heathenry on that generational level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. It's it's honestly, that is definitely something I worry about is the overculture that my child's going to be brought up in. Because, I know I don't have any fear about who my child's going to turn out to be. Because, I turned out to be who I am, despite my parents making some mistakes that they admit to having made and made up for later in life. I got to the point where my parents are great. It was just when I was younger that they didn't always do the right thing. And, I'm starting with the example of where they went wrong and then where they went right. So I know where to start right from the beginning. Like you were talking about earlier, each generation being better than the last, each generation not making the mistakes of the generation before and having to come up with whole new mistakes to make. And hopefully fewer. But, while I have no concern about who my child is going to grow up to be as a person, I have to wonder about whether or not my child's going to grow up to be a heathen. And whether or not I should worry about that at all.
Right. It makes me think about how I approach my own heathenry out in the world in this over Christian culture. And it's worked really well for me. Wherever I work, wherever I'm going, I don't lead with, hi, I'm Alf, I'm a heathen. I lead with, hi, I'm Alf, I'm a man. Yeah, and they come to find out I'm a man that they can respect and like, and they get to know me, and it'll come out eventually, because it always does in some conversation, and then I can talk about it openly. But then they think, well, I already like this guy, he's okay, so I guess heathens are okay then. And that's kind of the way it tracks in my experience. But forgot what else I was going to say.
Well, if I could add. So to answer your question more directly about whether or not we should worry about our kids growing up heathen, I think it's really important to raise our kids with certain heathen values, as in, we are our deeds. The legacy that we leave behind really matters. Things like that. But if they don't grow up to worship the Aesir and Vanir, that's probably not the end of the world. But if they are heathen in their value system, if they bring that to the world, it doesn't really matter as much whether or not they turn out to be heathen in name, as long as they carry those core values with them. Now, obviously, my preference is that, they would remain in the heathen tradition, but I think it's more important that we imbue them with the really important heathen values that we've been talking about. That's what really matters, not so much the tradition of worshiping the Aesir and Vanir or what have you. It's more about understanding the importance of self-responsibility and community and the other heathen values that we like to talk about. Any thoughts?
Yeah. I have a granddaughter who comes to our events, and she spends a lot of time with us, spends weekends with us. And her parents are, from the overculture, though they're not practicing. But my granddaughter comes, and she speaks at Sumble. She speaks well, and she knows a lot of lore. And I haven't put it on her. Like, it's not like, when I was a kid, when I was a Christian. Well, do you want to be saved? No, it's not like that. It's just her choice. All I can do is give her an example, and just hope that it sticks. Really, I got into an argument with her parents about the devil. I'm like, I said that the devil's a Christian deity. I don't really believe in him, and that caused a big brouhaha. But I saw a question pop up about how do we deal with other relatives who are not heathen, and how do we cope with that? And for me, it's been a bit of a challenge, actually, because my brother is a big Christian. In fact, he became a bigger Christian when I became a heathen, and my entire family are Christians. And for me, maybe I'm just really lucky, but they all love me more than they're worried about our difference of religion. It has been, an issue. We've got in some arguments, but for the most part, we're all people.
So it's almost like the two things I'm taking away from that are, that Frith trumps. Frith is the important thing here. It's the familial bonds and the actions we make, and also that it's kind of hard to continue to say we are our deeds if we don't give a child the opportunity to commit their own deeds.
Very
choice.
Very true and very insightful. We have to let our children be their own deeds too. But you'll have so much opportunity as a parent to help them understand what that means. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, and Will sometimes, my friend Will here, he gets a little like, hey, stop talking about me. But I talk about Will a lot because I'm so impressed by him as a young man. He's the only person I know raised as a heathen, and I'm so proud of him. He's such an exemplary young man, and I've known a lot of men his age, and he's just a living, walking, breathing example of what our path can do for a child. I think you're in the best possible position, Thorin, bringing a child into the world and being able to raise it as a heathen, or let it see you be a heathen, and let that child make up its own mind.
Yeah, and definitely, we do enjoy heaping the praise onto Will. He deserves it. I hold him up as the reason your tribe has worth. Because if you guys can produce him, then.
So if I could talk about something, and maybe this will be controversial. I know there's nuance, but a lot of children in our society who are raised in a Christian overculture have this narrative thrust upon them that your deeds in general life are not quite as important as your belief in Jesus. That's a common theme, especially in evangelical families. And I think the more we can break away from that and impress upon our kids that your deeds matter, the better they will be prepared for adulthood. Because in the real world, in your professional life, in whatever you do as an adult, every deed you make, every sentence you utter,
good or bad,
has consequences. And I feel like sometimes, often, our Christian overculture underprepares us for that reality. So children sort of drift into adulthood with a notion that they can sort of do whatever they want. And maybe that's not directly a product of the Christian overculture, but I think it's a lack of understanding of the principle that we are our deeds. And if we raise our kids in a heathen environment and impress upon them that every action they make has a consequence, I believe that they will be better adults for it, because that prepares them for the real world.
Yeah, I guess it'd be the difference between, say you're sorry and everything's okay, versus, the deeds are forever and you have to fix it.
Right.
And, that just reinforces another reason behind the idea of, you can raise your kid a heathen without forcing them to be a heathen. I'll admit I went into that particular subject with my own ideas and bias, and this is all just confirming the idea that, you can't really make a kid be a heathen. But you
and
can
I don't think it's
them
right to. I think it's the only way. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just making the distinction between you can't make them be a heathen, you can't ensure that they're going to grow up to be a religious heathen, but you can raise them that way. And even if, they don't perform the rituals, even if they don't try to do all the correct religious things, they will still have the worldview, which is far more important.
Agreed.
Right, because what's the worst thing that can happen? They're not going to go to hell or anything. I mean, they're just going to, go down another path. And but they're going to be your children. And you're exactly right. Providing our worldview to children is a game changer. It changes how they will interact with the world. It changes how they, leave their house every day and go out into it. I mean, it's a dynamic paradigm shift from the status quo. And I think they're really fortunate. Your child is fortunate that you're going to be their father.
Thank you. So now we're kind of looking at, heathen parenthood as a force for social change. That's what it sounds like to me anyway, is saying that, we can make the world a better place just by raising
I agree. I mean, look, if you ask me if all of a sudden every household in America became heathen and were raised their children that way, would it be a better world? I would say absolutely yes. That's my opinion. Will?
Well, we just got a question from the IRC. What would you say are qualities of being a heathen father that would be important in raising a child? If I could just answer that.
Yeah.
I would say leading with example, being a person of integrity, realizing that the person you are today is going to influence the child that you will have tomorrow. That sort of awareness, which isn't, I guess, necessarily heathen, although I would say it is informed by heathenry, but that sort of perspective is invaluable in parenting. And maybe I'm not the right person to talk because I'm not a parent, but maybe if you want to add something on, Alf.
Well, you are the product. You are the example of being raised as a heathen. But I would add to that, I mean, if I had a little child right now, one of the things I could offer it as a heathen father is a true connection to their ancestors. Because that's very grounding. It's very, myself. I mean, everything I do, I feel the gaze of my ancestors on me, and I want them to be proud. And if you could transfer that to a child, I think you're doing it a great service as well.
And just want to point this out here, Will, your opinion on this matter is definitely important and appreciated. I look at this from the point of view of an analogy, because I never make those, as everybody who listens knows. One of the many things that I am in this world is a mechanic. And one of the things that I've screamed and yelled about so many times in mechanic is that you should never have an engineer who isn't also a mechanic. Because at the end of the day, Alf has raised heathen children, or he has raised men up to be heathens. And he knows the theory behind how to do that, but he can only work with it from his own experience internally. You're the product. And an engineer who never looks at the car and sees how it turns out is always going to turn out bad products. So you gotta look at the car and see how that's working out. And that's kind of what we're getting here with getting your take on this is everything that Alf has done, everything that your dad Dan has done has led up to you. And if they've done their jobs right, then you've come out well and will produce a generation down the line better still. So getting your opinion is seeing how well they've done their jobs. And so far, I think they did it pretty well.
And I think the saying that it takes a village to raise a child is really true. And that's part of the heathen perspective as well. But I think in our modern lifestyle, at least here in the States, and a lot of other industrialized areas of the world, there are a lot of kids who grow up with a nuclear family. They know their mother, their father, maybe grandparents, aunts, uncles, but they don't have an extended community. And what heathenry offers, not that it's necessarily the only solution, but I think it's really important to offer your child a community of solid, good people that they can learn from, that will be around them for an extended period of time.
I got something to say about that. And as you were talking, Thorin, I thought of the fact that Will is not my son, but I've had a hand in his life.
Yeah,
I've contributed to part of his experience, and I think that's what Will's talking about, the community aspect of heathenry. Also cannot be overstated. We have several fine men in our kindred, and any child in our kindred is exposed to them, and that's really a big deal. The whole community aspect. You are going to be a father, and you have all the people in your tribe that are also going to have a hand in the rearing of that child. And that's one reason that we're very careful who we let come to our events, and we screen people and stuff, because look, man, you are going to have an impact on our children. I mean, that's part of our community principle.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about that too earlier, because one of the things that I've said since the beginning with my tribe, when I've been founding it, and with how careful and selective I've been with the people that I let in, with the people that I raise up to be next to me, to be part of this fictive kinship, is I always said, I planned on reproducing one of these days, and I know that tribe is going to be a huge part of my life, and therefore a huge part of my kids' life. These people are going to be around my child and my children. They're going to be influencing them in ways that I can never imagine. Because if I'm doing my job right, that kid's looking to me for an example. And if I've done my job right, that means they're looking to those people as well, because it's the people I surround myself with. So it's been hugely important to me, and it's become a whole hell of a lot less, theoretical all of a sudden. And I'm happy to say that I can look at my tribe and say I've chosen well at this point, that I can look at these people and say, they're absolutely the people that I want around my kid. That if something were to suddenly happen to me and my wife, that I would have no problem with these people raising my child, knowing that kid would turn out the way I wanted them to because of that. And that's kind of one of the tangential things that I think that this episode needed to get to is, we're always pushing tribe building, and this is part of it. this is making something you can give to your children and making something that's going to help create your children, in a manner of speaking.
It's a huge part of it, and like I look at all the children in our kindred.
There's a lot of them, guys. Those of you listening at home, I've been to gatherings with his tribe before, and there's a lot of kids running around, and it's one of the greatest things about it. It always just makes me smile seeing all those kids running around.
Yeah, we got all these little kids, and they're throwing axes, and they're shooting bows, and they're running around just being kids mostly. Yeah, and that's the beautiful part of it. They're just being kids, and we let them be kids, and we're not cramming heathenry down their throat. We don't have to, because they kind of like us, and they see us how we live, and they're going to want to emulate us, because that's what children do in a good situation. But I completely, fully expect one day. I mean, I'm 54 years old now. I expect one day that Will here will probably be running, be the chieftain of our tribe, and if he wants to be. If not him, there's other children coming up who could be, and to me, that's huge, because I put a lot into this in my life, and to know that it'll keep going after I'm dead is so awesome to me.
Yeah, and I think this whole discussion underlines the importance of choosing good people to be in your tribe. It's really important to have those positive role models for the future generation. And here in Hawks Hearth, we try to have the highest quality people we can, so that the children who are raised in our kindred aspire to be like those excellent people. And that will make our tribe stronger and make the world a better place, one generation at a time. Now, a question just came in from the IRC. How do you feel about adoption and foster parenting? Does it fit into the heathen worldview? Yes, I think we can all agree that absolutely. Even if it's not a direct blood relation as a DNA test would reveal, what's important is that you're passing something on to future generations. And, if all the families in our tribe were related, we would be rather incestuous. But whether or not the children we're influencing are of our bloodline or not, I think is missing the point. It's more about passing something on to the world, passing on a legacy of good. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Anything to add?
Yeah, my oldest daughter is a stepchild. When I met my first wife, she was 2 years old, and I raised her as my own child. I never think of her as my stepchild. She's my child. I'm her dad. And, being a parent is, like Will said, it has really less to do with DNA and more to do with your legacy. I mean, that's a word that hasn't come up yet on this episode, is legacy. And Thorin, your legacy is fermenting in the womb. Fermenting's not the best word, but
no, I'm a brewer. I like that word. That's a good word.
Yeah. Well, and your legacy, and you'll see everything we do, everything I do, is part of my legacy. The podcast I do. My great-great-grandchildren will be able to listen to my words. I mean, everything's a big deal. When it comes to family, are the most important things we have in the world. Our most valuable possessions are our relationships, not just family relationships, our friends, our tribe. That's the gold that we possess, and people need to remember that, and remember to cultivate those relationships and tend to them. I'm off my soapbox now.
So, I mean, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to this is the knowledge that I'm helping to create somebody who is by their very existence going to be forced to tell my story when I die.
Yep.
Somebody, yeah, somebody who can keep me alive after I've died, and I want to give him a damn good story to tell. and I think that's one of the things I can't. I have a hard time putting into words, but I think in a lot of ways that, and this is kind of an unexpected side effect of this whole thing, is that I think for somebody who already has a strong heathen worldview, that this type of thing is going to ultimately turn me into a better
that you care about and that you care for. I was going to say something.
Well, if I could maybe elaborate on that. I think the underlying principle is that when you have a child, you feel it an obligation to be a better person in a way that you didn't before. Because now you're not just being a better person for yourself, you're also being a better person for this human that you've brought into the world. And that driving responsibility forces you to be a better person. Unless you're just a terrible person and you don't care, and there are a few of those. But in general, you tend to want to be a better person because you're not just doing it for you anymore.
Right.
I think that's part of the whole idea of why, even if the goal is not necessarily to produce a heathen, that parenting as a heathen is a good thing. Because even if the kid, in the end of the day, doesn't worship the same gods as you, they do the right things in this world. And one thing that we've tried to impress throughout the run of this show is that we're talking about heathenry, and we're talking about how to be a better heathen, how to do it right, or at least less wrong. But we try to impress upon the ideas that the most important thing is the worldview. The most important thing is that you are watching your own actions, that you are doing the correct things, that you are leaving the world a better place than you found it through force of doing the right things. That you're owning your own actions, and I think that it's never been as important to me as now than it ever has been that people act like that, and that I do my best to bring the next generation to this world acting like that, because at the end of the day, the human race continued on pretty good for 1,000 years with nobody talking very much about our gods. And if that's the way it ends up, in the future, that makes me unhappy. But as long as they're going out with the culture behind them and raising, being their needs, then I think that we've won a significant battle.
I agree completely. And, when I was raising my kids, I hadn't come to heathenry yet. But now that they're all grown, and I look at my children, I'm proud of them. I'm proud of the people they are. They're good people. And they're the kind of people I would want to be friends with, even if I wasn't their dad. And to me, that's a huge success. And I'm so thankful that that's how it is. But, to me, what the best thing about being a dad is throughout my children's growing up, and I'm teaching them things, because even though I didn't know I was a heathen yet, I really was kind of down deep. But so I'm trying to convey lessons and give them values and all this stuff. And a lot of the times, especially when they were teenagers, it's like it's just bouncing off their head. And a lot of times I thought, man, I'm not getting through. I'm not doing a good job. But then after they grow up and they have kids, then you get to hear them tell their children the same things verbatim that you told them. That's so awesome. I mean, that to me is the payoff of all the shit I went through as I was raising my kids. As a single dad, I didn't even, I got custody of my kids. I was a single dad. And when I see that, when I see my own words coming out of their mouth to their children, bam, that's a success.
Well, if I could add to that, I think.
Oh, did we lose them?
Are we still on there?
Sorry about that. I sent you guys a side chat. I got to turn my camera off for a minute, but I'm still here. I can.
Oh, okay. Well, I think the legacy that we leave behind with our kids doesn't just stop with them. It is brought unto the world through them. We leave behind these ripples of legacy, if you will. You know, our kids will have an impact on the world long after we're gone, and our grandkids. And even if we don't directly sire children, the people that we've influenced will go on to leave their own influences. And that's all part of the legacy that we leave behind. And so as heathens, it's important to recognize that and realize that the example that we set for the up-and-coming generation, especially our own children, will have ripples for generations thereafter. And that is probably the most important thing about parenting from a heathen perspective, I would say, is thinking about what sort of a stamp you will leave on the world through your child. You know, what will they go on to do? What kind of a person will they grow up to be? And that will in turn have an enormous ramification on how the world turns out down the line. And that's really where we can make our biggest impact as heathens.
Absolutely. So now one thing I wanted to bring up, and I would have brought this up a lot earlier, but I wanted to make sure that I you see, I'm not doing it alone.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. Repeat that, because
I said I'm cheating a little bit with this whole trying to raise a heathen kid thing, is in that I'm not doing it alone.
No.
And I'm not talking about my wife, obviously. I mean, that kind of goes without saying that, you know, she's in this with me. And I'm not even talking about the same, you know, takes a village thing. I'm talking about the fact that I'm not the only one in my tribe doing this right now. Our producer, Matt, his wife is also pregnant. They're actually expecting theirs about a month and a half before mine. So I get a little bit of a cheat sheet, a short distance ahead of mine to see how things are going. And I bring that up because, well, besides the fact that I think everybody listening should also congratulate our producer, Matt, because he's the best person a man could ask for in a tribe. And honestly, other than myself, the best father a child could ask for. But I bring it up because it goes back to that aspect of the importance of tribe, which we never mention on this show ever, and how much easier I think that's going to make this whole thing, is knowing that I have somebody right next to me that I see every day that has to do this along next to me.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, that's perfect. It's true. I mean, like today, for example, kind of a mundane day for us. We had 9 sheep that we had to shear, and who came to help us? Our tribe. Will came down. An entire family called the Jimos showed up, and Ben Upton showed up, young guy in the army, and they helped us. And it would have, we'd still be out there shearing sheep if they hadn't have showed up. And there's 2 little kids. Natali, he's a young boy, and he's going to be awesome. He was helping. He was right in the middle of everything. I mean, that's what tribe was about. Even though we didn't do any rituals, we didn't, even talk about anything heathen. We were being heathen today with our tribe.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's important to remember, that the quote-unquote heathen influence that we leave behind in our kids is not about bloats or symbols or any of the rituals. It's about deeds, and it's about the person that we are, and the person that we are an example for. And that's really the important part, which is why ultimately it doesn't matter so much whether or not our kids grow up to be a pious heathen, if there is such a thing. It more matters that they grow up to be a good person who reflects those values of self-accountability. That's really what matters.
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
Honestly, I'm not going to lie. I am a little bit looking forward to the fact that, right next to my kid in the same tribe, there's going to be another heathen kid. It's going to make it a little bit easier to, withstand the issues of peer pressure and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And those two children, I don't know what their genders are going to be, but they're going to be running your tribe, 30 years from now, probably, maybe.
I hope so, because I don't want to be running it in 30 years.
Right.
I want to retire one day.
Yeah, but like to add to what Will was saying, like my dad's not a heathen. Actually, I think he actually is, but he can't come. He's a closeted heathen because the rest of my family's Christian, and he's trying to keep the peace. But he's an awesome man, and I always credit him with who I am, because really all the good things about me come from him. I can't take the credit, even though he's not a heathen. So like that's kind of the reverse of what Will was talking about. As long as your children grow up and are good, solid people, I mean, really, what's better than that? Well, maybe them also being a heathen. But.
Well, and back to the topic of raising your children around other children who are being raised heathen, we definitely have that situation here at Hawks Hearth. And I think it is really cool to see multiple families raising a generation in a heathen community. Because then you don't just have one or two kids who go on to lead the kindred or lead the tribe. You end up with a whole generation who identify as heathen that will be able to pick up those traditions that they learned from their parents, that they didn't learn from books, mind you. They didn't have to do all the homework of going through the stages of being a baby heathen. They were just raised in it. And then collectively, if you've done everything right as a tribe, that generation will go on to be the next generation of a heathen kindred that they learned organically, I guess, if you will, from the generation before them. I mean, that's real heathenry. We tend as heathens to come into this religion as adults, to do a lot of homework, to do a lot of research, to figure out how to be heathen. But it won't really be real. It won't be real heathen until we have kids who have become heathen because they were raised.
Honestly, if he'd been available this weekend, he'd be on the show right along next to me because, we're both trying to figure out how the hell we're going to do this thing. But it's his birthday and his wife took him camping. However, he does have a tiny little bit of reception on his phone, and he sent me a question that he wanted to ask. He says, what's the difference between how a heathen man approaches raising a child versus a heathen woman? And obviously we can only answer half that question here, but he moves on from there and does to expand, how does a heathen man raise their kids to treat women?
I can answer the second question with respect and dignity. As for the first question, I'm not sure, honestly. I don't know there's a whole lot of difference between how you raise a female child in a heathen culture versus a male child. I think mostly it revolves around being a good, healthy adult without so much of an emphasis on gender. I think it's important to have positive male and female role models in your tribe, because then you have role models for any child that enters. And that would also include non-heteronormative members of LGBT communities, in case your child ends up that way. I mean, I think it's important to have a wide variety of role models, male, female, or otherwise, so that anyone can aspire to be better. That's really what matters. So I'm not sure it has a whole lot to do with gender. Maybe Alf could expound on that, but
well, I mean, if excuse me, if I've raised boys and girls myself, and with my son, I had a lot more acumen, if you will, because I'm a man and he was a male, and so there's certain things. There's a lot of mysteries that I had around women, and as a single father with 2 daughters, I went through some crazy stuff, just trying to figure out what was going on with them. But my personal message to fathers of boys with regard to how to treat women is, one of the best things we can do as a man is to share our strength with everyone around us. Everyone who needs our strength, we share it with them. And, particularly women. And women, I think, personally should be somewhat revered. I mean, there's one thing I love about Heathenry. Our female goddesses were dynamic individuals in their own right, and huge role models for young girls growing up as heathens. And I kind of pizzled out there.
Well, I think we answered the question.
I think so. It does make me realize that I do have a question of my own, and it's not for you guys. This is actually a question that I'm really hoping will make it to next week's episode, because I have a question for Lauren and the women she's bringing on for her night. Is I, at this stage, don't know whether I'm having a boy or a girl. And I honestly, while I'm okay with whichever one turns out, I'm a little bit more comfortable having a boy because I know how to deal with boys. I don't know how to deal with a little girl. When I'm, with a little boy, and or especially once that kid hits like 8, 9 years old and older, it's like he does something stupid, up backside the head. That was stupid, boy. But I don't feel like that's the way to approach a little girl most of the time. And obviously every child's different, and you're going to have girls that are going to respond to that where boys won't. But, that's just been my experience so far. So I want to know from the women next week if there's any significant difference in that, especially if we've got mothers on the show.
Yeah, I haven't been through that. I can speak to that a little bit. I remember times when me and my son and my daughter would be sitting there and having a decent conversation. All of a sudden, my daughter starts crying and runs upstairs and slams the door. And I look at my son. I'm like, "What happened?" He's like, "I don't know." And that's just something that would happen. And also, shoot, I'm having a hard time remembering what I was going to say, but.
Well, we got another question in from the IRC. Question: if you do adopt, do you think that affects how you approach certain things? I don't think so. I mean,
if I were going to adopt a child, one thing I might do, me personally, I wouldn't tell everybody to do this, but when the child got a little older, I might, do a DNA test on that child, find out where their ancestors came from, and and really make it kind of a fun learning thing for them to find out who they are, because we tend to identify ourselves from who we came from and where we came from it. And if you can capitalize on the good things of those areas, that's something I might do. But other than that, I don't think there's any difference raising an adopted child.
No.
Well, I think there's a little bit of recognition of the fact that, we've talked to the show about Orlog before, and there's a little bit of recognition of the fact that while most of an individual's Orlog comes from his people, his family, and I would say that in the case of an adopted child, their family are the people that adopted them, but some of that is going to come from their blood relations, and so there may be, obviously I've got no direct experience in this, but there may be a good call for trying to, like you were saying, help that child find out, on a blood level where his or her people came from, just so they can try to begin to get a little bit of a grasp on the portion of their Orlog that comes from that.
No, absolutely. And I think it's really healthy to foster that sort of interest in your ancestors and the concept of Orlog. But at the end of the day, we're all just human. We're all just people. And the community that we're raised in is far more important than our genetics or, the people who spawned us. What matters is who raised us. And I think you're exactly right. That is by far the most important factor. Not that we should ignore the fact that a child's adopted or anything like that. I mean, that should be respected and honored, but also give them the strength of affirming that you belong in this community in which you were raised. And do not let the fact that you're adopted make it seem like you are somehow less in touch with our ancestral tradition or are less a part of the community. That would be wrong as well. So right. I feel like there's a balance between giving that child the opportunity to explore their own unique ancestry and being in touch with the ancestral tradition that we practice here in Heathenry.
Right. I would say, if I could think of any one thing that, personally, again, me as somebody who doesn't have that experience would say, you would want to go about it a little bit differently, is that a child being raised by heathens is going to inherently understand their position with their parents. That they are loved, that they are accepted, because honestly, they wouldn't still, as a kid, you wouldn't still be living in your parents' house if they were heathens, if they didn't accept you, because they would have cast you out a long time ago if they didn't accept you. And I think that comes across really well in the way we would raise our kids. However, in an adopted kid's life, there's going to come a time in their life where they're going to find that out. And they need to have a really solid understanding of how you as parents feel about them being family. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that completely. And a question just came in asking if heathenry was patriarchal. And my personal opinion is heathenry patriarchal? I don't really think so. Do some tribes and kindreds treat it that way? Yeah, they do. Do others not? Yeah, that's true. So really, I think it's part of our own tribal culture, what we do with that, in my opinion.
I agree. And maybe this is my own personal influence from our own tribal thew, but I think we should try to be as progressive as possible and offer the same amount of opportunity for leadership to males and females. I feel that heathenry informs me to believe that it's our deeds that matters, not our junk. It doesn't really matter what's between our legs. It matters what we can do in the world. It's far more important. But
right. There's I was about to give an answer that's sort of going to cover the follow-up question that just came for that, which is, do men and women have prescribed gender roles in modern heathenry? And where I was going to go with my answer to the original question as well is I wouldn't call heathenry patriarchal by any stretch, because that implies some sort of inherent leadership of the men and some sort of inherent superiority of the men. Certainly not. But are there certain places where there are gender roles in heathenry? Absolutely. And those places are primarily within ritual. There are going to be times where a certain person doing a certain thing within ritual for reasons of semiotic language needs to be a fertile female or needs to be the Lord of the Hall, etc., etc. As far as, there being any sort of inherent, like I said, superiority, absolutely not. And it's not just theoretically true that a woman can lead a tribe, it's demonstrably true. Lauren is she who must be obeyed in her tribe, is the title that she likes to joke about. She's the chieftain of her own tribe. And I don't think that anybody on this show is going to say that there's anything at all wrong with that. And it just seems like, in fact, nobody ever really thinks about it. It's just the fact that, well, Lauren's the chieftain of her tribe. I'm the chieftain of my tribe. Alf's the chieftain of his tribe. We are the people that are in charge of our tribes, and it really doesn't matter what's between our legs in that particular aspect. The only time I would say it matters at all is in cases of ritual semiotics. I actually had a really interesting conversation with somebody in this area who was speaking with my tribe, and the person was trans, and she was asking me about that sort of stuff, and I explained to her, it's like there would be traditional ritual roles for women that if you were part of my tribe that you would not be fulfilling. But then again, neither would a prepubescent girl or postmenopausal woman, because that particular ritual role calls for a fertile woman. But beyond that, that's all I can see as there being any reason to even pay attention to it.
Yeah, and even then, with ritualized gender roles, you have examples in the lore. For example, it is spoken of that scythe is a practice for females traditionally, and yet Odin learns the traditions of scythe from Freya, even though he's a male. And then he takes some shit for it in the Locusenna, but it shows that even in the lore, people were pretty forward-thinking with the sense that these were not rigid gender roles. And, even if they were in the lore, which they weren't, but it's important for us to be progressive. So I'm not going to be the gender role Nazi in rituals as long as it can be executed efficiently and still maintain the spirit of the ritual. So even then, I think it's not that black and white. And I think we have to beware of projecting a patriarchal overculture through gender roles in our ritual or in any other way, because the overculture is patriarchal and we shouldn't necessarily be beholden to that.
Yeah, and I would add that I agree with Thorin. There are some things that are there are some very black and white strict gender roles in heathenry and in humanity. One of those is a father is a male and a mother is a female. You can't change that. That's how it is. And that's not a bad thing. It's supposed to be that way. And it works out really perfectly, like it did with my parents. But going on from there, I think me and my wife, I think we're good examples of a good balance of gender roles in our community. She kind of, she she runs things a lot. I mean, she's very organized and stuff like that. And I deal with a whole different, set of things. I mean, maybe Will could speak to that as a member, but I mean, hats off to my wife. I could not be the chieftain I am without her. Just no effing way.
Well, and I think she's absolutely a chieftain in her own right.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are a partnership, really, that carry this kindred. So, anyway, that's a bit of an aside.
I'm really sort of sad that. Oh wait, I'm sorry. Is she going to be on next week's episode?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, that was right. I had a different topic in my head confused there, and I think that's absolutely fantastic that Lily's going to be on next week's episode because she gets the last word in this conversation.
Yes, she does. Yep. I'll be in the other room, like watching the live feed, like seeing what's going on, probably. But
yeah, so I mean, that's going to be a fantastic episode. I was really happy that we were able to arrange the 2 episodes back to back like this. I'm super looking forward to hearing what comes out of that one.
Absolutely. Just got a question here. How is physicality important as a man? How is it different today versus historical heathenry? I think I can answer that one. It's different today because we don't have to worry about not having enough upper body strength to till enough land to feed our community. Although that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we don't have to worry about getting killed by people who are more powerful. It's kind of handy. But I don't think physicality defines someone, but striving for physical self-improvement is never an ignoble goal. Working on your physique is a form of self-improvement. It's by far what defines us as in terms of how much of a man we are. It's not in the size of our biceps, it's in the size of our deeds. But, working out or striving to make yourself more physically fit is still self-improvement. And I still think it's an aspect of our heathen worldview, but I don't know how to...
Yeah, I agree. And whether you're a man or a woman, as a heathen, I personally, this is my own personal thew, I think that we have an obligation to our ancestors and to ourselves to be the best we can physically, mentally, emotionally, intellectually, and to just be on a path of perpetual improvement. I think kind of that really, to me, is the example Odin provides us. He is the seeker of knowledge, always trying to improve and get better. And I guess that's all I got to say about that.
I think that you're both hitting it pretty hard on the head there. Trying to improve yourself is part of it and an important part of it. But I think that the more important part of it is always addressing whether you are useful or a burden to your people. And it's not necessarily about being the dude that can go lift the 400-pound ship anvil, but it's about being the dude who's not going to drop dead at 45 of a heart attack. It's being able to do the things you need, doing the things you need to do to provide for your people and to not be a drain on your people. So there you go.
Well, and that whole thing changes constantly with the times. What it takes to be successful in the 21st century is not what it takes to be successful in the 9th century. And so we need to keep sight of that.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I think that answers the physicality question. Yeah, it's good to get more fit, but it doesn't define you as a person. Let's see. We got, there's 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
So let's try to wrap it up.
Yeah, there's one more question that I wanted to get to that we kind of skipped past earlier. It was from Robin in the chat. And she says, how would one go about raising a child as a father if they didn't have a father or a father figure in their life growing up? And I think that's kind of an important one to get to real quick.
It's a really great question, and especially nowadays, there's so many people who are being raised without fathers, and we're going to deal with that as heathen tribes. People are going to come to us that never had a dad, and they're going to have children. And my advice for these people is to, again, it goes back to the tribe, the importance of the tribe, and relying on other male role models within that organization. I mean, there's a lot of single moms who do a fantastic job. I've known several, and they fill both roles. They're like a dad and a mom. But it's a rare thing, and it's not easy, and doesn't come native to a lot of people. So my advice to somebody like that would be seek out a man that you admire and try to get him to be involved in your child's life.
Yeah, agreed.
So for my part,
sorry.
I say for my part, and one of the reasons that I wanted to make sure we got to see answers, that one touched a little bit close to home for me, is I did spend a significant part of my childhood as that kid. I alluded to earlier that my parents, I love them. They're great people now. They weren't always. They made some mistakes when I was young, and part of that was my parents did divorce. My mom took me to the other side of the country. My dad wasn't around. And then when we moved in with my grandparents. And then when I was still really young, my grandfather, who was a paragon of manly virtues, he died. He died a lot earlier than he should have. And so I grew up with my grandmother and my mother. And while my mom's a great woman and she's a great mother, I was missing something. I was definitely missing something. And it was causing problems for me. Ultimately, when my dad got his shit together, I ended up moving in with him. Moved out of my mom's in with my dad. Everything changed for me, as I had grown up my whole life having that feminine influence and had gotten a great deal out of it, but had not been rounded at all. And it was starting to be an issue. And then I started getting that strong male influence from my dad. And honestly, if there's one thing I'm going to take away from my childhood and give to my kid, is the one thing that worked better than anything on me to make me do the things I was supposed to do and become the person I was supposed to be. It wasn't punishment when I did things wrong. It wasn't being grounded. It wasn't, spankings or anything like that. It was that my father created an environment of mutual respect. So that the worst thing that I could possibly do was disappoint him in my own brain. And so I strove not to. And but I hope that in part answers that question, is that I think the strong male influence needs to be there. Not everybody's going to have a father growing up, but you need to find them that influence. So yeah, go ahead and if you guys want to wrap up your comments on that.
I don't have anything to say.
I wanted to share a quick story about that kind of. You can edit it out if you want to, but I watched this documentary, and there was this a nature preserve where they had all these young orphaned elephants, and they were all males. And on this reserve were also rhinoceros and a few other animals. Well, they hit adolescence, and they started finding dead rhinos everywhere. These young male elephants. These adolescents were just killing them for fun. So to correct that, they went to another reserve and they brought in this huge bull elephant and just put him on the island. Everything changed. He became the example for those young male elephants. And I thought it was just a beautiful example of the same thing happens in humanity.
Yeah, that's actually, I think that's a really apt example. That really just kind of spells it out in pretty clear language. But we have just run up against the wall of time on this episode. In fact, we're about a minute over. So we need to wrap this up real quick. I thank you guys both for being on tonight. I think between the two of you, you've helped us tell about half the story. And we'll tell the other half next week when Lauren does her ladies' night and talks about motherhood. So I want to go ahead and say real quick before you guys take off. One thing I meant to mention at the beginning of the episode and did not is that Alf here has his own podcast called Being a Better Man with Alf Herigstad. I got that right?
Did you say Being a Better Man?
Being a Better Man.
Yeah, Being a Better Man. It's on iTunes. Being a Better Man podcast.com. You can find it there too.
Yeah, and you know what? I've listened to, not all of it, but I've listened to a great deal of his podcasts on there. And it's not a heathen podcast necessarily, but it's definitely from a heathen, and it's he talks about things in a way that any heathen would understand. And a lot of it seems like really simple, duh moments, but hearing it said is extremely important. And sometimes he hits topics that aren't necessarily all that duh. So if he's especially got a good podcast if you've got a short commute and you want to listen to something, your podcast ends up being about 15, 20 minutes most of the time, unless you've got a guest on.
Yep.
So I highly encourage everybody to go check out Al's podcast.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not a heathen podcast. It's secular, and it's that way for a reason. But I am infusing heathen values all through it all the time. So yeah.
Absolutely. So other than that, thanks guys for being on. I'd like to remind everybody to, if you're in the area, come check out the Arlington Viking Festival, as they are our sponsors, and we actually happen to like them on top of that. So come see me and Josh at the Heathen Talk booth. Go see our producer Matt, and hopefully myself at some point at the blacksmithing demo, and then check out everything else that's there. It's a good time to be had by all. Check out our website for more events and stuff going on. Check out our website for all of our various bits of social media, Wintermoot as well. So, everybody, I hope you can join us next week when the women folk get on here, tell us everything that we did wrong tonight, and tell the other half of this Parenthood story that we're hopefully trying to do a good job of telling. And until that happens, I want to remind you all, you're doing it wrong. I don't have another host to tell me they're not the boss of me. Whatever. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night. Thanks for having us.